Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something that shapes our workplaces, our paychecks, and our lives in ways we don't always see: gender discrimination. We're going to go beyond just being aware of bias and really unpack the data, the surprising drivers, and most importantly, the solutions that actually move the needle.
So let's just start with one number that, well, it's pretty staggering. A United Nations report found that a whopping 90% of all people, and that includes both men and women, hold some kind of bias against women. Think about that. This isn't a case of a few bad apples. This is something woven deep into our global culture.
Okay, so to make sure we're all on the same page, what are we really talking about when we say discrimination? At its heart, it's simple. It's making unfair judgments based on what group someone belongs to. It's treating a person differently not because of who they are, but because of a label, whether that's race, age, or in this case, gender.
So here's our game plan for today. We'll kick things off by looking at the hard data behind the pay gap. Then we'll explore the really surprising impact of parenthood. After that, we're going to search for a real fix by looking at what doesn't work before we finally land on the kinds of systemic changes that actually do.
First up, let's follow the money. Because when you want to see if discrimination is real, one of the clearest places to look is right there in our paychecks.
Get this. According to the Pew Research Center, back in 2022, women in the U.S. earned on average just 83 cents for every single dollar earned by a man. And what's really wild is that this number has barely budged in 20 years. That tells you just how stubborn this problem is.
But you know, it gets even more complicated when you bring race into the picture. That 83 cents, that's for white women compared to white men. But for black women, that number drops to 70 cents. For Hispanic women, it's just 65 cents. This shows you so clearly how different kinds of discrimination can pile on top of each other and make things even worse.
And this disparity isn't just about pay. It starts before anyone even gets hired. Research from the Harvard Business Review found something that just blew my mind. A woman is 79 times more likely to get the job if there are at least 2 women on the final shortlist. 79 times. That single piece of data shows you that the bias isn't just about who a manager picks, it's about how that final list of candidates gets made in the first place.
And the bias just keeps showing up. On one hand, you have managers who are twice as likely to hire a man. Then, on the other hand, you see this confidence gap. Men will often throw their hat in the ring if they meet just 60% of the job requirements, while women often feel like they need to check every single box, 100%, before they'll even apply. So you've got this 1-2 punch of external bias and internal hesitation, creating a huge barrier from the very start.
Okay, so the data is undeniable. You can see it in pay stubs and hiring patterns. But the big question is why? Why is this still a thing? To really get it, we need to look at one of the biggest drivers of the whole disparity.
And one of the biggest factors, which might actually surprise you, is parenthood. Having children changes the career equation in a huge way, and it does so very, very differently for men and women. I mean, this slide just lays it out so starkly. After having kids, mothers are less likely to even be in the workforce, and they tend to work fewer hours. But look at fathers. They're more likely to be in the workforce, they work more hours, and they often get a pay increase. It's like their career paths just split onto 2 totally different tracks.
This boost for men is so well documented, it actually has a name: the Fatherhood Wage Premium. We talk a lot about the Motherhood Penalty, and that's real, but it's just as important to realize that there's a fatherhood bonus happening at the same time, basically stretching that pay gap even wider from both sides.
And this all comes to a head during a very specific time in our lives. The data shows the pay gap becomes a chasm when women are between 35 and 44 years old, and it's no coincidence that this is the exact time when many women are most likely to be at home raising young kids.
So we see the problem, and we see one of its biggest causes. The obvious next question is, how do we fix it? Well, as it turns out, the most common tool that companies reach for might not be the right one for the job at all.
I mean, here it is, plain and simple, from Harvard sociologist Frank Dobbin. For years and years, the #1 solution for bias in the workplace has been unconscious bias training. The thinking goes, if we just make people aware of their hidden biases, they'll stop acting on them. Simple, right? Except the research says it just doesn't work.
So why does it fail so badly? Well, a few reasons. For one, it can actually backfire, making stereotypes more present in our minds. That's called the rebound effect. It can also lead to something called moral licensing, where people go to the training, pat themselves on the back for being cured, and then are actually less careful about their biases later. But the biggest problem is this. Training tries to fix people, when the real issue is a broken system.
So if training people isn't the answer, what is? Well, the solutions that actually work don't try to rewire our brains. They change the systems and the rules of the game we all operate in.
A perfect example of a systemic fix actually comes from the world of politics. Lots of countries, especially in Scandinavia, use gender quotas for their governments. So instead of just hoping more women run for office, they change the rules to guarantee a certain level of representation. And the result? In places like Sweden, women now hold over 45% of the seats. It's a direct, structural fix that just bypasses individual bias altogether. And we can apply that same exact thinking to hiring. Instead of trying to train a manager to ignore the name on a resume, you redesign the system so the name doesn't matter in the first place. How? You start everyone off with a blind skills test. You let technology grade candidates purely on their ability to do the job. You take the biased human screening out of the equation early on. That way, you make sure the most skilled person gets the interview. Period.
And this right here is the main takeaway from all of this. While individual prejudice is definitely real, the bigger, more stubborn problem is the flawed systems in how we hire, how we promote, how we pay, that let those biases run wild and create these unequal results.
So if just being aware of the problem isn't the solution, then the real challenge becomes one of design. It's asking us to stop looking inward at our own biases and start looking outward at the systems all around us, at work, in our communities, and to think like an engineer. So the final question really isn't, am I biased? The real question is, what system will you change first?
Thanks for joining us for this explainer. We'll see you next time.